well. So what this summit is really about is making it easier to take decisions when you don't have 6 EU members like we had at the start, or 15 like we have now, but up to 28 over the next 10 or 15 years. What it's not about is ganging up on Britain and robbing us of our sovereignty and all the nonsense which the Sun, alas, and my friend Trevor, alas, print far too often. It's not about that at all. It's about poor people in Eastern Europe getting a decent shake.
So you're getting the wrong end of the story then?
Well, just for once, I think that it is Britain that is not in the firing line. It's the big battles between France and Germany over the question of the distribution of votes. Germany wants more, France wants to keep the same.
These are the vetoes?
No, this is on the
representation.
representation. Yeah. And I think actually this is a big chance for Britain to push its own case and perhaps get in between that long-established axis between France and Germany. But the big problem is that in order to gain some sort of influence, it'll have to give something in return. And just as a return to Michael, The Guardian itself is 4 square behind the Sun as far as I can see from its editorials, insofar as, Michael, most of its editorials agree that this is a very undemocratic and unaccountable institution which is stretching itself beyond its means.
Well, of course we could agree about all sorts of things. The tragedy about the debate on Europe in this country is not that Europe's perfect or The Guardian thinks it's perfect. We always get into trouble with Tony Blair for not being enthusiastic enough. It's that you can't have a proper grown-up debate on these issues, not being accountable, as Trevor rightly says. It's because everything which is printed in, the worst offender is the Mail, Sun's the second worst offender, Daily Telegraph probably number 3. Everything they say about Europe is it's all terrible. They're all out to get us. You'll think reading The Sun that they gave us BSE, not the other way around. I mean, Trevor's a wonderful apologist for The Sun. He looks so magnificent and so responsible, and he's so clever and funny. But what he just said a moment ago isn't what he writes in the paper. He's got a piece, bought today's paper, the Romano Emperor, high-handed Prodi blast Blair, and it's about attacking us and putting the summit in peril. He lifted it from yesterday's Independent, thoroughly misrepresents President Prodi. He's a lovely man, Trevor, but he's a naughty boy, and he's a much naughtier boy to the Sun readers than he is on television. Much naughtier, and that's the problem.
I think you might have The Guardian there, Michael.
Michael has had a pretty good run here, I think, and I think that it's worth quoting a couple of things that The Guardian said, which could easily have appeared in The Sun. Indeed, I think we lifted some of it. It says that what is said far too often is simply not what is done in Europe.
Agreed.
Just a moment, Michael, you've had your run.
I've got your cutting
Enlargement
pocket, Trevor.
looked at another way raises it. Hang on.
Right, come on.
Enlargement looked at another way raises enormous economic issues which the EU, frankly, is in no shape to deal with. It goes on and on and on. We could easily run that editorial in The Sun, and Michael would denounce it as being xenophobic and anti-European.
No, I wouldn't. That's absolutely not true, because what you do, and this is your cutting, Trevor's been quite a good boy for a week. I had to go back a whole week before I found him telling porkies.
Back out again, Michael. Watch out.
EU Constitution, well, that's all wrong. EU Army, it isn't an EU Army. Trevor actually writes here, the Rapid Reaction Force would have the power to drive deep into any territory within 2,500 miles.
Exactly what the German Foreign Minister said.
European armies couldn't go to the toilet without the Americans' permission, and that's one of the troubles.
And why is William Cohen today saying that there are problems between NATO
but hang on a minute. I mean,
there are problems, but The Sun always presents it as a threat to Britain. The fight, because Trevor's on telly, he says it's between France and Germany. He's absolutely right.
Okay, but I mean, this absolutely underlines, doesn't it, the problem that we have at the moment. The British people are having great difficulties understanding what Europe is about.
The Sun and the Mail tells lies all the time.
They don't explain it. This is the whole point.
What do you make, Trevor, of Tony Blair's attitude now, and the rather bullish attitude he has taken? He's almost picking a fight with a lot of papers over the way that they're portraying Europe.
It's a bit like the National Health Service. He's getting his punch in first because he knows there's big problems ahead. And as far as the public is not being properly acquainted with what's going on in Europe, that's the whole crux of it. The consent of the public across Europe is not being obtained for any of the big decisions which are being made in Nice today and in Amsterdam in the past, and we are not given any chance to vote upon it. It is undemocratic, unaccountable, bureaucratic and demonstrably corrupt.
I would agree with a lot of that, and at the risk of sounding like Tony Blair, that's why Tony Blair has promised a referendum if we go into the single currency. Personally, I shall vote against it like Trevor, but he's promised it, and that gives people a say. Real problems, if only we could discuss them like grown-ups. Bring us back in a week and we'll give you an update on Nice.
Right, well, there's a deal, okay? Michael White, Trevor Kavanagh, thank you very much.
Always great.